Let's get started with this story about Joe Biden and Zelenskyy in reference to this NATO summit and something that was announced yesterday, which I thought was in a kind of sneaky way, because they knew that more people and mainstream media would be focused on this NATO summit, right? That was the big news for the most part. Well, he did have a discussion with Zelenskyy at this summit. As you can imagine, Zelenskyy is trying to make it so that Ukraine will be a part of NATO. Right now, the answer to that has been no so far. But let's hear how this discussion went. And I have a couple of things I want to add in between.
I hope we finally have put to bed the notion about whether or not Ukraine is welcome in NATO. It's going to happen. You're all moving in the right direction. I think it's just a matter of getting by the next few months here. So thank you. And, it's hard to believe 500 days. It's easy for me. Just mostly I've been in and out of Ukraine a lot before the war and some since the war. But I'm going to say again what I've said to you many times. Not only all of you, but your people, your sons, your daughters, your husbands, your wives, your friends. You're incredible. Ukraine, the whole world's seeing the courage. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. The courage and commitment of the average Ukrainian. When you see a 65-year-old woman on television after her apartment's been bombed out, picking up the pieces and going to help the next door neighbor. I mean, it's just astounding.
You know, it's easy to have courage when you have billions of dollars and ammunition coming your way constantly. It's a lot easier to have that courage. You know, I imagine he would not say the same thing for people in Yemen and people in Somalia who are not getting that support from the U.S. government. Instead, the U.S. government is pretending like Yemen didn't even happen. There have been some politicians to push towards, ending the humanitarian crisis that has been caused. Let's be real, that has been caused by the weapons that the U.S. government gave to Saudi Arabia. But no, he's not going to mention that.
You're setting an example for the whole world of what constitutes genuine courage. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, I mean that. What courage means. And, I think it's your resilience and your resolve has been a model for the whole world to see. And the frustration, I can only imagine. I know you're many times frustrated about when things get to you quickly enough and what's getting to you and how we're getting there. But I promise you, the United States is doing everything we can to get you what you need as rapidly as we can get it to you.
The United States government is doing everything that they can to get you what you need as rapidly as they can get it to you. That's Biden speaking to Zelenskyy there. It's interesting the way that they can respond with such a sense of urgency when it's another country, but they can't respond, to the American people with that same rhetoric or behavior. Because when it comes to us, they tell us we don't have the funds for it. They have the money. Or they say that, no, we can't talk about that right now. Think about this for a second. It's not just weapons that have been sent to Ukraine. When we talked about those packages a couple of months ago, and one of those packages included healthcare. But they can't even give all of you healthcare. The sense of urgency doesn't apply to the American people because our politicians belong to corporations in the military industrial complex. So the sense of urgency doesn't apply to us. We haven't hit full rock bottom yet in the United States. Times are tough. And we've seen tough times before during the 2008 housing crisis. Times are tough. They're hard. They're difficult for people. But we haven't hit rock bottom yet. And I think the true test is going to be when we get to a point economically where people do hit rock bottom in this country, and people will see our government for what it really is, just another corporation in a White House.
And the Secretary of Defense has been a constant, how can I say it, refrain from the Defense Department and everywhere else, and calling other secretaries of defense around the world to say, let's get some help. So I just want you to know it's real. And, here in Vilnius, we held the first, as you well know, NATO-Ukraine Council. But you and I talked about this beforehand, about the commitments, the security commitments we were going to make while it becomes official, until it becomes official. And I think that's important. And I want to tell you, when I got here, Mr. President, and I started to sell that idea to other heads of state, there was no reluctance. There was no, I don't want to.
Did you hear what he just said? That he sold the idea to other heads of state. Again, this just points out that oftentimes it is the U.S. government that is the driving force here in reference to foreign policy. He sold the idea. He says there was no hesitation, because a lot of times these other leaders do not push back on the U.S. government, especially if they're considered to be one of our allies.
Everybody just said, okay, and sign on. So it's real. You've done an enormous job. You have a lot more to do, I know, and I just think that, we're going to make sure that you get what you need. And I look forward to the day when we're having the meeting celebrating your official membership in NATO.
Let's be real here. So they're talking about the official membership in NATO. This is a disaster. This is an absolute mess. You will never hear him say those words to the American people. I look forward to giving you what you need. When do they tell us that? Never. No, it's just optics and what we can try to do, or we can't do it because of this party and that party. Think about that for a second.
So thank you for what you're doing. And the bad news for you is we're not going anywhere. You're stuck with us. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I will start. You said about 500 days is really a difficult job for our people, soldiers and civilians, mother, fathers, and children, really to fight for their life and for these values. And thank you very much that all these days you are with us. I mean, you and Americans, all of Americans and Congress. I mean, thank you, Mr. President, that you, like we say, shoulder to shoulder with us from first days of full-scale war. We appreciate for this very much, and really, we understand your leading support, because when you give such messages and when you gave sometimes some weapon, I'm sorry that, but I want to say it to journalists, like I said during our meeting, our council, that it's very simple, to criticize, for example, clusters ammunition, which you made difficult political decision, but you have to know that Russia used such weapon from the first days, not only full-scale war, from first days of occupation of Crimea from 2014 and 15.
So two wrongs make a right? So because Russia used that in the past, so it's okay to use it now?
All our territories in Donbass, they used it. And now they continue doing it. And that you gave us, this decision will help us to save us. And that's why my appreciation for this. And I didn't hear from all the, parts of the world when Russia began to use it. I didn't hear that some of, countries criticized Russia. But I think
that is incorrect. Russia was criticized for using cluster ammunitions. In fact, I played the videos for that for you on this channel. I played the videos where Jen Psaki, who was the press secretary at that time, said that is considered to be a war crime. They were criticized for doing that. What does he know? What is he talking about? Now, I can't speak for European journalists, but American journalists did criticize Russia for doing that. So he's upset because some of the journalists have criticized him and Joe Biden for making that decision and choosing to use that. For those who are not aware, cluster bombs are dangerous because it doesn't hit or focus on a specific target. So it can like spread, basically, which means that it is more likely to harm civilians and more civilians than other types of ammunition that has already been sent or given to them. So there is nothing to applaud in reference to this. So yes, some of the politicians like Barbara Lee spoke out against this. Other journalists have spoken out against it because when Russia was doing it, it was actually Jen Psaki who said that that is a war crime. So there's hypocrisy. There's always these excuses as to why the US government can do it, but when another country does it, it's a war crime. It's a war crime when we do it too. But that's not what's being said. So here is Zelenskyy trying to tell you that basically he does not deserve the criticism for this, and goes on to lie to you and tell you that Russia wasn't criticized when they did it. That is a lie.
That it was very useful to put them. So thank you so much for this help. We really counted on it, not only on this, I mean, that's totally. And you gave us huge support. I want to thank to all Americans. We understand that it's more than 43 billions for today. It's big support, and I understand that it's all your money, but you have to know that you spend this money for not just for fighting. You spend this money for our lives, and I think that we save the lives for Europe and for all the world.
How are you saving lives if you're using a weapon that is going to hurt civilians? How you say you're still losing lives? Listen, war is a racket. Seriously, let's not sit here and pretend like during war, it's only the soldiers who are injured or who are killed. That is not the case. And I believe the war in Vietnam really woke up a lot of people to that when they used to show war footage on television during the Vietnam War. That was the last time they did that. They stopped doing that because the American people were able to see that children were hurt. Innocent people that had nothing to do with the conflict at all. So how are you saving lives?
So thank you very much for this also summit. At the end of the summit, we had, I think, this council and great success and security guarantees, as you said, that we began to speak about it in Kiev. So now we see that you had great idea, that's G7, and now I know that last message that also there are countries which join to G7 decisions, and I think it will help very much because it's really fact that it's very concrete things. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for acknowledging the American people. I think it's correct that
Joe Biden is not well. Are you guys watching him in this video? Joe Biden is not well. Who's making these decisions?
we are a large country, but I think we've given more than every other nation combined in terms of assistance and cost. And the American people are supportive. They're supportive.
Speak for yourself, Joe. Which American people is he referring to when he says the American people are supportive? Who's he talking about? Is he talking about Congress? What about all the Americans who want this war to end, who want to call for peace, who want some type of negotiation, which, by the way, Russia did try to negotiate? What about those Americans? You don't get to speak for the rest of us, Joe. How dare you? In another country, go to Lithuania and basically tell everybody, yeah, the American people, they support it too. Speak for yourself.
Because they know it's about you, but it's about more than you. It's about innocent people around the world, and the absolute brutality with which Putin is acting and the Russians are moving on. It's just...
And we'll never mention the fact that Ukraine provoked Russia. You'll never hear them say this. And this is not to say that Russia was right to invade, but they purposely leave out the fact that Ukraine provoked them. For years, this didn't just come out of the blue. We never get to hear that other side. Have you ever noticed that? MSNBC, CNN, are they interviewing people in Russia? It's a controlled narrative. And then you do have independent journalists that are there, like Fiorella Isbell from the Convo Couch. Wyatt Reed has also been there. They're giving you the other side of the story that mainstream media is not giving you. And then those people are smeared as Putin puppets because why? Because they're telling you the other side of the story. There's two sides to a story. The narrative is controlled, especially when it comes to war. Mainstream media heavily controls the narrative. Let's go back to the Iraq war. Think about what we were told. There are weapons of mass destruction. There were no weapons of mass destruction. And the fact that we've been lied to repeatedly by our own government, the fact that so many people can't even sit back and say, I wonder if they're telling the truth about this conflict. Think, people. It's a hot mess. This man is not well.
It just sounds like something out of the 14th century, the way they're acting. And so, but I can't emphasize enough. And by the way, I know you thanked him, but I think we talked about it before I went to Tokyo a couple years ago. The idea that Kesheev is increasing their defense budget, having to lower their domestic budget to aid directly and get directly involved in what's happening in Ukraine.
They shouldn't be doing that. And this is what I said before. No other country should have to struggle or go into any type of debt. Their people should not have to struggle and suffer financially. I'm talking about the UK and I'm talking about Germany. For two examples, they should not go into a financial crisis, an economic crisis, because they're shelling out money to help Zelenskyy. It's just, I hope people see this for what it really is. When you have someone like Zelenskyy, let's remember Zelenskyy was an entertainer. He knows how to perform. So let's remember that. Let's remember how BlackRock came in. BlackRock is coming to set up shop in Ukraine. Surprise, surprise. So you got corporate money and you got MIC money. Every time I turn around, I see this man on the cover of a magazine. What is this really about? What is it really about? Think about this. I don't see people who are being killed and starving in Yemen on the cover of Vogue magazine and Time magazine. I don't see the people being bombed in Somalia on the cover of those magazines. Those people are suffering. Those people are struggling. I just talked earlier today about the conflict going on in Sudan, which people need to pay attention to. This is predicted to be the next proxy war. I don't see those people on the cover of Time magazine. But him and his wife on the cover of the magazine. What is happening here? I just hope people see this for what it really is.
Remarkable. The sad, sad news is you're in this situation. The incredible news is it's bringing the world together. It's bringing the world together in a way that it's a hell of a price to pay. But it's bringing the world together, and people are realizing that you just can't stand by and let this kind of aggression occur.
Okay. So he had that conversation with Zelenskyy, and there was a lot of media coverage in reference to the NATO summit that just happened. But behind the scenes, there was something else happening too in reference to this conflict. And you heavily need to pay attention to this, because I'm here to warn you that this is how it starts. The White House released a statement. May have skipped by some of you. This was released yesterday, ordering the selected reserve and certain members of the individual ready reserve of the armed forces to active duty. Listen to this. They're already starting. I'll make it a little bit bigger for you guys. I don't know what that thing is. Maybe I'll put that. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including sections 121 and 12304 of Title 10, United States Code, I hereby determine that it is necessary to augment the active armed forces of the United States for the effective conduct of Operation Atlantic Resolve in and around the United States European Command's area of responsibility. Long story short, while mainstream media was so busy covering the NATO summit and a bunch of other garbage that's not really important, behind closed doors, Joe Biden and his administration were actively pursuing to send U.S. troops overseas. I kid you not, U.S. troops. Okay, so if you go to the top, it says selected reserve. This is how it begins, though. First, let's just send a couple of members from the armed reserve, the reserve officers. Reserve officers, they're the ones, they're not technically full-time, right? So 2 weekends out of the month, you work for the reserve, usually have another full-time job. But this is how it begins. Start off by sending them. And I sincerely hope more people cover this, because this is a big sign. This is not to de-escalate a situation. This is to escalate a situation if you're bringing in the U.S. troops. Let's go on with this statement. In furtherance of this operation, under the stated authority, I hereby authorize the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security with respect to the Coast Guard when it is not operating as a service in the Navy, under the respective jurisdictions, to order to active duty any units and any individual members not assigned to a unit organized to serve as a unit of the selected reserve, or any member in the individual ready reserve mobilization category and designated as essential under regulations prescribed by the secretary concerned, not to exceed 3,000 total members at one time, of whom not more than 450 may be members of the individual ready reserve as they deem necessary, and to terminate the service of those units and members ordered to active duty. Let's talk about the number of 3,000. Not to exceed 3,000. But what will happen if some of those soldiers are killed? Then you send more to replace the ones that were killed. This is a very fancy academic way of saying, I'm sending selected reserve troops to Europe. For any of you who are anti-war activists, you have to send this letter to your friends, your organizations. Not a lot of people are talking about this. I don't think a lot of people know. But you have to send this out to let people know what's happening right now. It goes on to say here, this order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. And that is signed by Joe Biden. And this is exactly what I was afraid of. That eventually they'll say the weapons aren't enough. It's not doing enough. And eventually it would get to the point where, well, they're not winning, which I'll get to that in just a second. So they need more help. So we had no choice but to send troops. This also shows you that the narrative that has come from mainstream media, which has continued to say that they were winning, that Ukraine was winning. Remember this? And I kept telling you that's a lie. This goes to show you that they were lying. If they were winning, why is he sending cluster bombs to Ukraine? And Zelenskyy just told you so himself in that conversation and said, we have no other choice. It's the only way we can really effectively fight back. If they were winning, why are they sending troops over? So I hope more people call this out, because this just shows you that CNN, MSNBC, they've been lying to you this whole time. I told you there was no way they were winning. If they were winning, we wouldn't have continued to send them more packages and more weapons. Now, this is a common sense thing. But people will sit there and they'll watch mainstream media and they'll just be like, well, they said on CNN today that Ukraine's actually winning and they're actually doing pretty well. No, like, use your brain. It's just like, I don't. Pay close attention to that. And we'll keep an eye on that. This is a mess. And I can't even tell you, it's 2023. Joe Biden hasn't even been in office the full 4 years yet. And we're already at this point. Already. Never met a war he didn't like. You have to remember there's money to be made here. And that's what this really comes down to at the end of the day. The money. It's embarrassing. It's disgusting. And I don't like Donald Trump. But I really do believe that he wouldn't have gotten us into this. What a mess. What a freaking mess.